just get that. Okay. Before we dive in, I want to briefly ground us in what we mean when we're talking about economic development. Economic development isn't a single project or a one-time event. It's a long-term relationship-driven work that helps businesses grow, remain competitive, communities attract investment, and our region can create opportunities for the future. At GRCA, we often describe economic development as a collaborative ecosystem or a puzzle. No single organization has every tool or every area of expertise. Each organization plays a unique role, and together we help businesses and communities across our county move projects forward. Today's conversation is about connecting those dots, and you'll hear how organizations collaborate, how projects evolve over time, and why there is really no wrong door when you're talking to any one of us on this panel today. Whether a conversation begins with one of us and moves to another organization, the goal is to connect people to the right partners and resources to move things forward. And we're really fortunate to have representatives from the City of Reading, Berks County, the Greater Berks Development Fund, the Redevelopment Authority, and the Industrial Development Authority joining us today. So rather than spend time reading biographies and doing introductions, I encourage you to visit the event page to read their full biographies of all of our panelists. We're really fortunate to have a great depth of expertise in everyone joining us today. And so to get started, I'd like to ask each panelist to introduce themselves and take a minute or two to just describe their organization and explain the role it plays in our economic development ecosystem. I'm going to ask David Barr to start. I'm going in alphabetical order of everyone's first names on our panel. So, David, please introduce yourself and tell us about the Community Development Department.
Here, Aaron. I'm Dave Barr. I'm the Community Development Director for the City of Reading in this position for 1 year as of tomorrow. And I would describe the Community Development Director's role really as two things at the same time, somewhat in tension or in conflict with each other. One is an activist role, and the other is a gatekeeper role. So as an activist, I am trying to bring businesses into the City of Reading, create opportunities, remove barriers, etc. As a gatekeeper, I'm responsible for offices like zoning, permitting, property maintenance, and codes enforcement. And, these are positions that often aren't popular. They require, often fines and things like that. But these are, the roles that help us avoid problems. We maybe don't want someone to build that deck without a proper foundation or to change that single family home into a 3 or 4 family apartment building. So these are the two things. I'm trying to create economic activity at the same time, ensure that our zoning and codes enforcement processes protect our citizens and our buildings. The types of projects we typically provide or support, all of them. We need affordable housing in particular. We have a lot of old factory buildings. We need to reuse in other ways. And we've been working hard on all of that. And I don't want to emphasize projects today as much as setting the groundwork or creating the conditions for development. That's what I'm focused on. I think the projects will come if we have the right conditions for them. So that's my role, and I'll pass it off, I guess, to the next one alphabetically.
Thanks for that. My name is Jamie Perez. I serve as the Executive Director of the Berks County Redevelopment Authority. This is a role I accepted in January of this year. Prior to my current role, I was part of the Imagine Berks Strategic Economic Development Team, specifically tasked as its housing planner. I came into that role having had extensive experience with urban renewal programs, having participated in key initiatives throughout the county over the last 10 to 15 years that promoted first-time homebuyer opportunities and also the remediation of blighted properties. And that experience taught me the value of urban renewal and what it can do to transform neighborhoods and communities through the power of taking action and providing opportunity. And my goal at the Redevelopment Authority is to continue the tradition that the Redevelopment Authority has filled for many years in ensuring our built out environment remains useful and productive well into the future. Thank you so much for having me as part of this panel today.
Jeremy Zaborowski, Aaron, thank you so much by going alphabetical by first name. It's a nice change of pace for me. Um, so I run the Industrial Development Authority for Berks County, or Berks IDA, as we like to call ourselves. It's a little bit more glib than Berks County Industrial Development Authority. Three legs of the stool for us, or three pieces of the puzzle, to use Aaron's metaphor, the three pieces that we cover for you that are germane to the people in this room or in this Zoom conversation today. If you have a piece of land and you're like, man, I can't unload this thing, no one is interested in buying it, come talk to the IDA. I make no promises, but we consider ourselves developer of last resort. We're taking on the hard to develop sites in Berks County, and that's where our focus is. We have an old World War II base behind the airport we're getting close to finishing, and we just acquired 20 acres in the city that was an old chemical and paint factory that we're also working on. The second piece of the puzzle has to do with financing. So we have partnered with the county, and we also have put some of our funds at risk because we are considered the infrastructure focus economic development entity in the county. The county really tasked us with looking at what are the infrastructure gaps in our communities and how can we augment that. So when you have a project and you have to build the last mile of sewer, not just for your project, but for the next 10 projects that come after you, come and talk to us and we can look at financing ways for paying for that in a way that makes sense and makes your pro forma actually balance out. And then the third piece of the puzzle that we provide is, and we do this with the Redevelopment Authority as well, which is RACP grant support and other forms of grant support. The state requires a public entity act as the intermediary for those types of grants, basically so that if you run away with the money, someone's left holding the bag. We have to be there to be able to figure out how to make the state hold on those grants. And so if you are in this room and you're like, oh, I've been trying to think about getting those grants or been looking at how they could work for my organization or business, then talk to Jamie or myself to be able to insert that piece of the puzzle for your solution. So that's really the three areas that the IDA works on. We develop stuff, we build stuff, we provide financing to help your business or help your financing of infrastructure within the community. And then we provide this grant support when you have projects that you need to get just a little bit of supplemental funding in order to make work or make happen. So glad to answer anything around that and glad to be part of this group today.
Thanks, Jeremy. Pam.
Thank you. So Pam Bennett, I'm the Director of Community and Economic Development for Berks County, and we're structured a little bit differently than the city. And I know that we've already started to throw out a number of acronyms to everyone that, Jeremy, we'll go back to that when you get to tell everybody what that is that you were talking about. So the Community Economic Development Department in the county also includes our Workforce Development Board, our Berks County Planning Commission, and our Department of Agriculture. And all of that came to be after the county undertook an economic development strategy for the county, and it was known as Imagine Berks. Imagine Berks encompassed so many different focus areas of a county comprehensive plan that as the economic development strategy was coming to the end of 3 years of actionable items, what we did is determine that it's so comprehensive and it's so overarching that we will now use Imagine Berks as the moniker for our comprehensive plan. And that is underway right now. And our planning team is doing an outstanding job right now of engaging residents, businesses, all stakeholders in Berks County in order to put together a document that is really the guiding policy document for the county in a whole lot of areas, not just economic development, community development, housing, land use, transportation. It's essentially one of those, you name it, we included in that plan. And I think that's what allows me to have the fortunate position of being able to work with all of the partners that are mentioned here today. We also make sure that we are still continuing to fund some programs that we were able to fund as a result of us receiving federal dollars during COVID. So we also provide funds to organizations to do microloans, microgrants, recreation activity, parks planning. Again, a little bit of you name it. And if the community needs it, we're going to find a way to resource it.
Deb Millman is the president of the Greater Berks Development Fund, which is the certified economic development organization for Berks County and is affiliated with the Greater Reading Chamber Alliance. And essentially, that includes taking on lending through the Pennsylvania Industrial Development Authority. It's the Catalyst Loan Fund, which is a separate program, but smaller lending amounts. And similar to the IDA, let's call us the developer of last resort for those difficult pieces of land that remain in our community. I'm sure Deb had more to say, but as we figure out technical issues, we'll just keep moving forward if that's okay. Well, thanks everyone for the introductions and overview of your organization. And I really wanted to talk about bringing a couple of real life projects to life and not talk about collaboration in theory, but illustrate through a few examples. Many of the projects people recognize across Berks County involved multiple organizations, multiple funding tools, and sometimes multiple years of coordination before the public ever saw the finished project. So my first question is what projects best illustrate how this collaboration works? Jeremy, you mentioned the Glidden site. I think that's a great example of a long-term redevelopment effort, if that would be something we could use as a kickoff.
Sure. Yeah, I think and love to. I mean, all of us can speak to this project, even though we are the owner of the site. Um, it took us 2 years to buy it because of the environmental challenges associated with the site. And in the process, it required us to work with the private sector to develop a redevelopment plan. It required us to work with the city to make sure we had a plan that was feasible based on the zoning and land use requirements of the city. And we have we had participation with the county in talking through how to structure the plan. So the Glidden site, for those unfamiliar, is 20 acres right near Baseball Town. Um, it's adjacent to Baseball Town, Mike's Sandwich Shop, and Mike's Tavern, Al's Cabaret, Platinum. One of those should stick out to everybody in the room. No judgment, but the 20 acres there has been vacant for over 20 years, 25 years at this point, because of the environmental hair on the dog of this project. It was by coordinating with the city, with our developer, partnering with Greater Berks Development Fund, which had already looked at the site and had significant data on it. It was because of the information we were able to obtain from those different organizations, the upfront conversations we were able to have, and candid conversations we were able to have, that gave us the comfort necessary to acquire the site and start the process of land development, which is the next step. So now that we're in the land development phase, we're even more collaborative. And so David can speak to the conversations that have been occurring with the city, everything down to land development being submitted to the Planning Commission on behalf of the city, all the way down to we have a short-term tenant on part of the lot that we wanted to have activity there, so it wasn't we didn't have people try to break in and that kind of thing. And the city worked with us and gave us advice on making sure that happened too. So David, anything I missed in kind of the work we did together on getting the Glidden site up and running?
No, it's just a great example of the multi-layer aspect of a project where you've got, the IDA, Industrial Development Authority, kind of leading the effort, but it involves the county, the city, the CRIZ authority. I mean, just coordination of all of these various inputs and stakeholder points of view. And I think that's kind of typical, right? I mean, rarely do we have a project that kind of it's off on their own doing, with no overlap to the city, the county, and so on. I mean, one other project I've raised is the transit-oriented development. It's not a project, it's a initiative or a programmatic change. And again, back to my earlier point about creating the conditions for development. Things like this, changes in our zoning ordinance, boring, right? Who wants to read an ordinance, right? You'd rather see a crane building a building, right? That's far more interesting. But these boring ordinances make a difference. They make it more attractive to developers. And so, we developed this transit-oriented development. It was an initiative led by the GRCA, the Greater Reading Chamber Alliance, funded by, I think, a grant that they applied for. The county provided review on the ordinance itself. The city's going to implement that. We passed it, our council passed it last week. So it's an example of the partnership that we have to have on these kinds of initiatives and projects. Otherwise, nobody can do these themselves.
And can I just add from a county perspective, both the transit-oriented development, the return of passenger rail, obviously the county has taken a lead in that with the other three counties involved in that initiative. But I think what's very important is one of the things that we're very committed to as a county is to see redevelopment. It makes a lot of sense from a planning perspective, and it makes a lot of sense to our city and our boroughs. So reinvestment and redevelopment, I would say, are two of the things that you should really be on the lookout for if you want to know what the priorities are for the county. And I suspect, David, you would also say for the city as well.
Sure, we're an older, densely developed city. I mean, we don't have farmland. We're not trying to protect our farmland from strip malls. We're a different kind of situation here than the surrounding townships and the county in general. So, as I said, we need to be activists and looking for opportunities to put these old manufacturing buildings to work, adaptive reuse, to make them into cool loft apartments and things like that. So yes, I mean, redevelopment is really the way Reading is going to succeed or fail going forward.
And I think when we talk
I'll add
about,
that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, when we're talking about putting the pieces together, so it's transit-oriented development, it's the work that the city is doing, which has also contributed to the interest that the IDA and the Greater Berks have in the Panoptical building, which is kind of within the bullseye of that transit-oriented development area. And, is really the kind of that foundational, as David said, maybe not so exciting work, when you're looking at environmental conditions of an old brownfield that take quite a while to really dig through and decipher and really position the property for future use. But that's going on simultaneously, as well as the changes that the city are making. And, at the end, all of these pieces, will come together to really, as, Pam said, set the stage for city and county redevelopment. This is kind of the grind that has to happen, I think, before hopefully, the exciting cranes will come and, and everybody will be hopefully cutting some ribbons soon too. So.
Yeah, and to your point, I'll add that I guess development and redevelopment more broadly oftentimes share the same goal, in that creating places where people can live, work, invest, and build their future. The difference is where that opportunity begins. Traditional development often starts with a blank canvas, creating something entirely new. Whereas redevelopment begins with places that have already had a story. It takes existing buildings, sites, and neighborhoods and gives them a new purpose. We believe there is tremendous value in what already exists. Long before we arrive, communities have roads, utilities, public services, and buildings themselves. Those investments created jobs, supported families, shape the community that we know today. When a building becomes vacant or a property falls into disrepair, that investment doesn't necessarily disappear. It simply becomes underutilized. And the mission is to recognize the potential that still exists and unlock it. Uh, so respecting the investment that has already been made while adapting it to meet today's needs. Sometimes that means rehabilitating historic buildings. Sometimes it means repurposing former industrial sites into housing or commercial spaces. And other times it means assembling properties, eliminating blight, and preparing land for future investment. Um, every project is different, but the philosophy is always the same, which is preserve what has value, improve what no longer works, and create opportunity where others may have seen obstacles. While at times that activity takes on the persona of being a last resort option, I view our team as one of limitless capacity because of the tremendous resilience that is required to ultimately achieve our shared goals.
Thanks,
I,
Jamie. I think that's a great. Jeremy, were you gonna add
I,
one?
I was just going to add to that. I do think that um, something that needs to be emphasized for everyone in the room is that everyone on this call has given me crucial advice for my projects to get them across the finish line. And I would like to think that I've played a key role in also providing that same kind of resource to the other people in this room because there are so many different alphabet soup of programs. We all have different priorities in our missions. And so we are focused on different products or different things that we need to get the things accomplished. All of us coming together on a regular basis has been very productive in getting solutions to a lot of these problems because they're not straightforward answers to any of the questions. Like you can't just anyone who says just go out and do this doesn't understand what it takes to get to that point. And the people in this room understand that you can't just go do something. And so I'm appreciative of this kind of brain trust that we have for knowledge transfer and getting solutions.
And I'll
Thanks,
just
Jeremy.
add, as I was thinking about this, webinar, one of the things that struck me is I don't think that any one of us on the call would have thought that when we grew up, we were going to be in economic development, right? So I don't know if there is an economic development major in college like there is with accounting and engineering. And, as I'm looking at Jamie and Pam and David and Jeremy, the way that we've come to this work is through different backgrounds. And so I know you know, maybe having the background in finance and law, isn't necessarily my strong, I'm not necessarily always the strongest in real estate. And that's where I can reach out to Jeremy or reach out to Jamie. And, that is their, bread and butter background on a lot of these cases. And as Jeremy said, it's economic development pulls in a lot of different skills and a lot of different, again, people with a lot of different backgrounds. And, it really is kind of a collective. And I think that's really demonstrated by the background of folks who are working on it. If there was an economic development major, I think it would be super interesting for a young person, but I don't know that there is one offered. So
Well, I would add that I kind of came into this field from an adjacent field. I wasn't really in this my whole career, but I found it really interesting, this whole economic development field. I mean, think about it. It combines politics, architecture, uh, real estate, finance, and legal. I mean, what other career could you choose that kind of gathers up all of those topics in one profession and in a locality? I mean, it's just a fascinating field. For any of the younger people in the audience today, I would really recommend sticking with it. Over.
Every day is different, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Right.
that's for sure. Trying to describe do your jobs is probably challenging because every day is different and you never know what the day could bring. Pam.
And Aaron, I know that there's a question in the chat,
Yeah.
but I also just want to say this is about not it's taking an idea from the idea stage through implementation and getting a project, what I'll say is to go vertical. And I wanted to give an example of a project that we have underway right now at the Reading Regional Airport. And we were able to partner with the County Industrial Development Authority, who administers the county's infrastructure loan fund. And that loan fund was actually set up because out of the Imagine Berks economic development strategy, we identified the challenges that we have across the county in terms of infrastructure and the lack of infrastructure in order to get projects to happen. And so we partnered with the IDA, we capitalized an infrastructure loan fund, and as we identified hangar development at the airport that really wasn't making economic sense or market sense for us to be able to move forward, we knew we had to bring in someone. We knew we had to bring in a partner that could bring resources to the table to make a project actually happen. And so I think also, in addition to economic development being all about relationships, it's also being able to have that aha moment to be able to say, here's who I need to bring in, here's what I need to do next. And bringing everyone together and all of our collective minds, I think really helps us address a lot of the economic development, community development, and workforce challenges and planning challenges that we see in Berks County.
Thanks, Pam. When we were preparing for this webinar, we kept talking about that our organizations do work collaboratively and this sort of concept, which I mentioned at the beginning of there not being a wrong door, that if somebody is talking to one of us and, to your point, Pam, about resources and resource identification, whether it's at the local, state, and sometimes federal level, what does that look like and bringing those pieces together. So I'm wondering if we could talk a little bit about what that might look like where a project, enters at one point and how it continues to move through. We sort of alluded to it through some of those project examples, but if anybody's willing to just do like a deeper dive on those handoffs so that it exemplifies that for the purposes of this webinar. Any examples? I mean, I think we've sort of talked through those, but go ahead, Deb.
I think the most recent example is probably the EthoSource project. So, a number of us on the call have known John Gallen for a long time, have been aware of his interest to transfer from a lease property to purchasing his own property, has looked, at quite a number of buildings over the years. And so I think when the former C.H. Briggs building was identified as a potential, he reached out to a lot of people, in the community, but I think what was great was then the communication was opened among all of us. So I know very early on, he had a meeting with the mayor and the city administration to just talk about the project and lay out kind of what his time frame looked like, what his project looked like. And so, from the beginning, the city was engaged, right away. And I don't want to steal any of David's thunder, but that has really been critical to try to again meet what his time frame was. Had a conversation with where our Greater Berks had in terms of potential financing, also with Jeremy, with the financing that he could potentially bring to the table, the county with the LERTA program, the school district, the city. So I think that's a great example. There were multiple conversations going on, but I feel like we were all aware of how it was tracking, what programs were going to be an option, which programs, would not work, and we'd had to go in a different direction. And, even though there were, again, conversations happening, at different times with different people, because we're a small group, I felt like we all kind of knew how this project was coming along and, were able to work on the different pieces that we had to. So David, I know the city has been really instrumental, obviously, in getting that project off the ground. And I didn't know if you wanted to add anything else about, how you were plugged in and how that worked.
No, Deb, I think you covered it well. For those of you that aren't familiar with the Ethos Source project, it's at 2047 Kutztown Road. This is the old C.H. Briggs building. It was vacant for a number of years. Ethos Source, I mean, if you want to pick a perfect kind of project example for redevelopment, they were in Morgantown. Lots of their employees were driving from Reading to Morgantown every day. They wanted to move back to Reading to be closer to their employees. So we're bringing manufacturing jobs back to the city. It's a sustainable business that refurbishes office chairs. I mean, so there's so many positive things about this business. Reusing an old industrial building, sustainable business model, Reading workforce. How can you not support this, right? So everybody saw this, got behind it, and gave it the support that it needed. So it's a great, great example.
Well, Deb, you bring up a great point about, when is the right time? So if someone was on this webinar or they have a client or customer that, is thinking about a project or, when's the right time to start that conversation? I'm not going to answer it. Someone on the panel has to answer.
It's never too soon.
Thank you.
Okay, it's never too soon, especially, you know, being able to understand and again, when there's that seed of an idea, it's important to be able to reach out and talk with someone. And again, and you're right, there is no one point of entry. We find that businesses, entrepreneurs, individuals come to that place where they know to go first. And it's up to us to make sure that they get then to the resources and to the conversations and the folks who can actually support that. And of course, being a planner, I'm going to say there's never too soon to start conferring with a planner to find out if a project is going to make sense, whether it's brand new development, greenfield development, or it's redevelopment. It's really important from a planning standpoint to get engaged as soon as possible.
Yeah, I think that as soon as possible is essential. I think more often than not, I see people come too late. They think, oh, they have to have it fully hammered out. When that happens, oftentimes the structure of their deal excludes them from different programs or different opportunities that can help them. And so it's really important to come to us early. And all of us are used to projects that have very long development horizons. They take a long time, they take a lot of work. We're not going to be bothered by something that is possibly in the theoretical stages. I'd rather it be then, and we can help frame it to match up correctly and appropriately with program needs, than already have boots on the ground or have construction already occurring, and then it's ineligible for any kind of aid or support. So please do come early and talk to us rather than late. And all of us are used to talking in confidence and not sharing details because we know that details change on these projects all the way up to and including during construction in my world of the development. And so it's really best to come to us. We'll hold it in confidence, help you brainstorm, make you aware of what is available, bring this team to the table when we're not necessarily the right pick, to make sure that you can have success in Berks County.
And
Yep.
to
I would
Jeremy's
just add to that. I'm
Jeremy's
sorry, Jamie,
point,
go ahead.
go ahead, I'm sorry. To Jeremy's point, the sooner the better, because redevelopment and economic development isn't always the easiest path. Existing properties and initiatives oftentimes experience challenges that require creativity, patience, collaboration across the groups. But the reality is that the rewards are lasting. Redevelopment strengthens neighborhoods, supports local economies, encourages private investment, and helps communities evolve without losing the character and history that have made them unique up to that point. So at its core, I view redevelopment as an act of optimism. It is the belief that people, places, and communities are never truly finished. There is always another chapter to write, another purpose to discover, and another opportunity to create. It's not as simple as restoring buildings, and this team helps communities realize the potential that those areas already possess.
I was just going to add that, in this time of Berks County, the real estate market is extremely tight. And so if there is a company that is looking to expand, to build a new facility or grow into an existing building, it really is important to start thinking about that sooner rather than later. That, as I mentioned, the, inventory for available industrial buildings that someone could readily move into could probably be counted on one hand. When folks look around the county and see a lot of farmland and open space, I think that there's the misconception that there's an endless amount of, properly zoned land for people to build a new building on. That's not necessarily the case. So, again, that's another reason to come, because even if you're, ready to go and think that you've put all your pieces together on your side, it's not, always the easiest path to find a new location. And so sometimes we have to get creative. And, as Jamie said, we're looking at, often redevelopment of properties or property assemblage in order to get the right site for someone. So, again, that's another reason I would say to start talking sooner rather than later, because, perhaps it isn't a readily available site, but it might require the redevelopment authority or the IDA or some intermediary to be able to piece together, again, property or a building that would be suitable. So.
Thanks. As a reminder, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We are going to be transitioning to Q&A in a moment here. But before we do that, I just wanted to ask the panel if there was anything else that we didn't cover today that you wanted to make sure was said or noted. David.
So Jamie Perez used the word optimism, and real estate development and developers are notoriously optimistic. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that. I think, again, we're never, I would like to put it this way. You're always, redevelopment is a journey. It's not a destination. You don't go to the gym and one day you're all of a sudden fit, or you don't take Spanish and all of a sudden you're fluent, right? It's a process that takes time. And same with revitalization. It's a journey, it's a direction. And you're either moving in that direction or you're not. So every day, I think we should be moving in the direction of redevelopment, whether it's at the city or the county level. And then the projects are just parts of that path along the way. So I want to de-emphasize projects and talk more about the process and the conditions and the constant need to be moving in the right direction. So that's how I kind of like to finish, if I may. Thank you.
And Aaron, I was just going to circle back to the concept of, there is no wrong door for economic development. When I think about my fellow practitioners, we all come to this work again from different backgrounds, but also have, belong to different organizations, different associations, attend different meetings, have different contacts. And, I think that's really valuable in terms of having people come to the community and, reaching out and saying, hey, I saw you at I met you at a meeting in Philadelphia, and I know you're the Berks County person, and I had, what do you know about this building? And, as we're all kind of fanning out in our own networks, I really think that that is super helpful to be able to have kind of a wide variety of contacts out in the community and beyond, because you just never know. You just never know when you're going to be at a meeting and talking to someone who has a project or knows of someone or, has a question about the city of Reading or what have you. And I think that we're really fortunate to kind of have not only, the network of people in this business every day, but also then kind of the domino effect of the contacts that each person brings and what that means in terms of, having economic development activity here in Berks. So just wanted to circle back to that.
Well, great. I like closing on both of those notes, optimism and, the ongoing collaboration and network that all of the organizations offer. One of the questions we received reads, how is the Commonwealth involved in connecting Reading to the regional economic development of the Philadelphia metro?
Well, from the Greater Berks perspective, we are part of the Southeast region for something called PrEP, which is, the workforce development and the economic development partners, are connected in terms of the programming and some of the work that we do in collaboration, on multiple county levels. That's a great way for us to be connected. We're also involved with discussions with the Philadelphia Chamber on their new initiative, which came out of the Brookings Institute study that was recently released. And although we're not formally part of that organization, we are connected to our partners. And I think we talk fairly often in terms of what each county is doing, and how we can collaborate on different initiatives, especially in the financing. We're engaged in something called Engage, which is business outreach. The workforce development work that is done, is all part of, we're oriented now, I think, more routinely in Southeast Pennsylvania. For over the course of a number of years, we've been pulled sometimes to the Lehigh Valley and then sometimes to the west with Lebanon and Lancaster, but I think we've really settled in the Southeast PA. And I think that's kind of naturally where we belong. And, again, the Commonwealth is part of all of those conversations that are happening down there.
Deb, I think it's important too to note that, because I've always said that Berks County is the keystone of the Keystone State. And we, for the sake of resources, we have also participated with South Central Pennsylvania as well. With a strong manufacturing base, it has allowed us to kind of partner all those ways. And you mentioned it. We are a industrial submarket of the Lehigh Valley, but a lot of those resourcing and regional kind of brainstorming comes out of Southeast and from South Central too. So I think we're really fortunate to be able to go a lot of different directions there.
Are there any other questions from the audience? Feel free to unmute and ask if you'd like.
It's okay. I'd just like to build upon Mr. Barr's comment from earlier as far as maybe what I interpreted as the essence of redevelopment, and uh, it is recognizing that yesterday's investment still have value, and that communities don't need to abandon their past in order to build a future. In many cases, the greatest opportunities already exist. We simply need the vision to be able to see them. The perspective requires optimism. Of course, not blind optimism, but the confidence to believe that people, places, and communities are capable of renewal. A vacant building isn't the end of the story. A struggling neighborhood isn't defined by its current challenges. Every place has another chapter waiting to be written. Most of all, it requires resilience. Redevelopment is rarely easy. Projects oftentimes take years. Even when you have partnerships, they evolve. Funding challenges will always emerge, and obstacles are inevitable. So progress often comes one step at a time. Success builds um, to those who remain committed to the vision long enough to make it a reality. And that's why I believe redevelopment is more than an industry, but more of a mindset. And it is the belief that the value is really never really truly lost. It is simply waiting to be rediscovered.
Erin, can I also jump in on something that is very specific? And if you want to talk about optimism and positive projects, the county and GRCA have been able to provide support to main streets across Berks County. So this economic development isn't just about the big projects, it's about the small ones too. And being able to support main streets in their efforts to attract small businesses and support small businesses has been really critical. Erin's been very key in being the convener of bringing the main streets in Berks County together. And we provide them real-time data so that it can guide their marketing, it can guide their outreach efforts, it can guide who might be willing to come to their community to locate there. And I think that's something that's very important to understand, that those small wins for those main streets and boroughs are really big wins for them. And they're really big wins ultimately for the county as well, because being able to create a critical mass of small businesses that can be supported in a borough is important for their own economic vitality, but it's also important in total for the economic vitality of the county. So yeah, not just the big ones, it's the small ones too that get a lot of support, and hopefully
Participate in a number of projects through something called the local share account, which we affectionately call the casino money. And that grant program is typically available to municipalities and nonprofits. But within Main Streets, it's oftentimes the nonprofit organizations such as our town foundation or Kutztown Community Partnership, Building a Better Boyertown, who are taking on kind of an economic development project within their community. So whether it's the Kutztown Strand or the Hamburg Strand, or Boyertown is working on a trail project, this is another way that, you may not sound as traditional economic development, but it is. And we're looking to hopefully do more of those projects within our main streets as well. So again, something that, is not kind of your bread and butter, but is going to translate into being an economic development driver within those communities. So we'll hear more at the end of July. So just wanted to mention that though.
Okay. If there are no questions at this time, and please feel free to ask questions post webinar. We're always, available to have additional conversations. I just want to wrap up and frame some of what we talked about today. Most successful projects in our community include many organizations and partners working together to help bring them to fruition. And of course, when we're working with the private sector, a lot of credit goes to those folks who are also spending their time, and time is money, on projects in our community, and we are, it's our pleasure to work alongside those projects. Our work is connected, and we're all working towards shared outcomes. There's no wrong door. Wherever a conversation begins, all of us on this panel, and I'm only serving as a moderator, but are willing to connect to the right resources. And you don't have to have your project completely figured out before having a conversation, because sometimes we're figuring it out together alongside a project. And we're here to help connect those dots, not create more complexity. So whether you're considering an expansion, redevelopment, or just trying to understand what's possible, please feel free to reach out. We are here as a resource and a connector to help move those ideas forward. I want to thank our panelists for sharing their expertise and the work that they do to strengthen Berks County as at large, and your willingness to collaborate on a regular basis. I want to again thank our sponsors, the Berks County Industrial Development Authority, the Berks County Redevelopment Authority, and Gallagher for supporting this series and helping us bring these conversations to the community. And I want to thank all of you for joining us today. We appreciate your time and interest in learning more about how economic development works here in Berks County. And if today's discussion sparked an idea or a project you'd like to explore, please feel free to reach out. And we're happy to start the conversation. Have a great day. Thank
See
you.
you. Thank you.